I'm Chef Jay Fields, and this is another episode of Exquisite Seafood. Today we're going to be talking about surf and turf, but non-traditional style, right? People say surf and turf and they have a certain image that pops into their head. I'm going to kind of challenge that and really push towards some different stuff. We're going to be doing scallops along with bulgogi, right? Bulgogi being a Korean style of dish using shaved steak, right? So steak and scallop. And then we're also going to be doing a Portuguese style pork and clams, right? And this is going to be a little bit of a spin on the traditional. We're using the pork tenderloin, some beautiful little neck clams, and making a beautiful sauce to go along with it. So please stay tuned, get your notepad out, and follow the ride. All right, guys, so we're back with some awesome surf and turf plays, right? Non-traditional, probably something that you haven't seen before. Typically, you think of surf and turf, people think of it just steak and lobster or shrimp and steak or something like that. We're doing a little bit of a different spin, right? So we're gonna be doing a Portuguese style pork and clams. For those of you who are not familiar, little neck clams. You know, what I'll be using is a pork tenderloin. You can use whatever cut of pork that you would like. Diced potatoes that are fried up, most important for this dish. And then we have a marinade here that I'm gonna touch on again. But on this side, we are going to be doing some seared scallops, beautiful in the pan, get a nice brown on those, caramelized. And then we're topping those with a beef bulgogi, which is a Korean style of almost Korean barbecue marinated ribeye that's shaved down. So we're gonna caramelize that and top that on top of the seared scallops, right? But first things first, let's talk about the marination step. Let's get down with the pork first and foremost, right? Because both the ribeye and the pork are gonna take a couple hours just to get those flavors going. So like I said, I have a pork tenderloin, right? Pork tenderloin is a very lean cut of meat, not a whole lot of fat, similar to a filet mignon beef, right? It is the tenderloin of the animal, which is actually the back strap, like goes along the spine. If the spine is right here, your tenderloins are gonna be adjacent to the spine, just like that. And it is not a working muscle like a leg or something like that, that if you can imagine a beef shank needs to be cooked very long time and slow to break it down. That's because it's a working muscle. The animal is walking with those muscles. The tenderloin is in the back, right? So it's very relaxed. It's not something that is working. So that's why tenderloins are a lot more tender than other cuts on the animal. But let's talk about our marinade, right? So we do have this beautiful marinade right here. Anytime you're making a Portuguese style pork and clams, there's some usual suspects that go into the marinade, right? So I have both red and white wine in this. I have some diced up red onion. I have like just a touch of cinnamon, right? And that's a flavor profile that, you know, that's what drew me to this dish. That first time I tasted it, I'm like, what is that? You know, the combination of flavors really kind of made my mind start thinking, and they were like, oh, it's cinnamon, right? And that's a secret weapon in this thing. You also have something called sambal, or a garlic chili paste that you can use in this as well. You could go alternative and do a red pepper flake. Red pepper flake will give you the heat, but not all the flavor that a chili paste would. I also have in this some sazon, some Goya sazon, which gives you a little bit of that achiote. It has like a cumin background to it. Really, you know, it gives you this beautiful red color as well. I have that in there. Lots of garlic as well. So that is the marinade that will initially go onto this pork. I'm gonna use some on the pork, but I'm also gonna save some to kind of cook these clams down as well, right? So that goes over there. I'm just gonna toss that around just a bit. You know, at least, I would say at least 2 hours, you know, at maximum 24 hours. You know, the longer that you marinate this thing, the more flavor it picks up. The only thing I suggest after the marination is that you kind of take it out and pat it dry, because what we're gonna do is sear this entire tenderloin and then slice it out to pair with the clams. All right, so we have our pork tenderloin ready to go into the fridge. Now, let's talk about our ribeye bulgogi, okay? So we're just touching on marination right now. So what I have here is ribeye steak, right? Ribeye steak is a very, not very, but a fairly fatty cut of meat. Typically you want to cook, if this was in steak form, you would like to have this at like a medium or more, just so it breaks down the fat. Sometimes when you get a ribeye steak medium rare, that fat doesn't get a chance to caramelize, right? Being that we're not doing a steak and we're shaving this down, you don't really have to worry about that. But what you do have to ensure that you are using is a fatty cut of meat that is not a working cut of meat, i.e. something like short rib or ossobuco, which has to cook for a very long time. If you were to flat sear this using ossobuco or something like that, it would turn out chewy, wouldn't be nice and tender, right? So we're utilizing ribeye, have that shaved down just as such, right? And inside of our marinade right here, we have a mixture of soy sauce, lots of ginger and garlic. You have some black pepper in there. You also have sesame oil, which is, typical usual suspects inside of bulgogi marinade. But one other thing that is also in here is like pineapple juice, right? An alternative that you can use to pineapple juice is Asian pear. What these two things have in common is that they have an enzyme in them that kind of breaks down the meat and tenderizes the meat naturally. I think that papaya also has that quality to it. Papaya, the flavors of papaya don't really work, but pineapple juice or some Asian pear puree inside of this would definitely help, right? So we're gonna pour this over our ribeye and allow that to marinate. Like I said, very, very similar. Being that this is shaved, you could probably go a little bit quicker, like a half hour to pick up to about 12 hours. And that should be fairly enough, all right? So we're gonna put all of this marinade right over our shaved beef, just like that. And then both of these are going to go into our fridge and marinate. So we're gonna go do that and come back and get down for the rest of the dish. All right, so we are on to the range and we are getting our Portuguese style pork and clams together. I have my pork tenderloin that I have dried off, right, and marinated. You can see it picked up a beautiful color. We just dried that off because we were trying to get a nice caramelized cook or sear inside this pan. I also have another pan warming up to get my clams started. So that residual liquid that was left over, the marinade that we put on there, I left some of that to the side, added some water to it just because it will be reducing inside the pan. So these clams need a little bit of time to open up. I added some water just to give them a little bit of breathing room. Okay, and then in the back I have my oil on a medium-high heat and to crisp up my potatoes. So let's talk about our pork tenderloin. So a little bit of oil in the pan. We are trying to achieve a nice hard sear all around this thing, right? It'll take a little while to get this fully cooked through. I don't plan on going in the oven. You absolutely could do that. It's all about trying to get that beautiful sear around this pork tenderloin. So I know I have some hot oil in the pan right now, and we're just gonna take that tenderloin and lay that right into our pan. Just like that, okay? So that is going to do its thing. You want to get a sear all the way around that pork tenderloin. The great thing about a piece of pork tenderloin is it's very consistent. It's a long, even shape, so it makes it easy to really cook it. If you're trying to sear, if you're trying to glaze, it's an awesome cut. Just always remember that it is very lean, right? So it is nice to add some very indulgent things to it. What we're gonna see is that with the fried potatoes, with your stock, along with your clams that we'll cook in the pan next, very indulgent, very flavorful, and you have a lot of things going on. So while that is doing its thing, let's talk about our clams, okay? So I have my pan on about medium heat as well. I have little neck clams. We have touched little neck clams before in a previous episode. Hitting these again. These are fairly large. Like when I went to the fishmonger, I said, hey, I want little neck clams, but give me about the medium-sized clams that you have, right? So they gave me some nice looking clams. You know, being that they are this size, they will take a little bit of time to cook. But one thing I like to do is to start the clams in a very hot pan. I'm gonna pump that up a little bit because that kind of shock of heat when you add those clams to the pan will help to assist open them up as they cook, all right? So I'm gonna let that heat up. As they are heating up, I just wanna show you the color that we're already developing, right? So we're gonna keep turning this thing, getting that thing going, but that's exactly what you want. A little bit thinner on this side, right? So the pork tenderloin will kind of be cooked and slowly work its way up to the fatter part, and that part will be cooked too. No need to worry about if you quote unquote overcook or this is well done and that's medium. We're going into a bowl, we're slicing this thing, and once that broth goes over, all those slices will kind of come up to the same temp anyway. So our pan is smoking now. I'm going to go and add some clams to that pan, okay? These are some fat boy clams. The fat boys are back, and they're in this saute pan. All right? I'm not even gonna do all those because they're so freaking big. We'll let those cook just for a second. I'm not gonna add my broth yet though. I have this big lid just to assist in them steaming, right? So let that rock for a second. We're gonna add our broth, allow that to simmer, and hopefully that will open up our clams. All their juices will release, and that gets mixed into the flavor of the broth, all right? So just keep turning this thing as we cook. Our next step is going to be our potatoes, all right? Look at that. Cannot go wrong with a pork tenderloin if you treat it the right way, all right? And this thing has been marinated, so it's just sitting with a lot of flavor and juiciness. So take a peek to the back. I see that I'm going pretty hard right now. I'm gonna go ahead and add my broth. I'm gonna add all of this too. Boom. All right, so you see that starting to simmer? I'm just gonna go ahead and put that lid on, okay? These will take, I assume, about 5 minutes or so to steam open because they are pretty large. So let's put our lid on and we'll come back to those in a second. All right, so next step is, you know, we talked about the usual suspects of a Portuguese style pork and clams. That crispy potato is something that you should find every time. You know, there are certain dishes that, you know, somebody says it and you have a vision in your mind of what you expect, right? Somebody says chowder, you expect something creamy, potatoes, bacon, right? Usual suspects of a chowder. We're talking about this, the usual suspect here. One of the components will be potato fried, crispy fried. So I had these sitting in some water. These will be going into our fryer. I quickly drained them, but always just be careful for that splashback on the oil. All right, so we're just gonna drop those in. Right, and we're looking for a little more than a golden brown. Like we're looking for these to get like a nice hard crisp on them. And the reason being is because they will be sitting in broth and you want them to have a little bit of body to them and not just kind of like disintegrate, right? So getting that hard sear allows that texture to stay on there. Just keep on turning this bad boy, all right? Every time you turn, you develop a little more color. That's exactly what you want. You'll notice that I didn't add salt and pepper to the pork tenderloin because it did sit in that marinade for so long. So if I would have added the salt and pepper, it would have been over seasoned and you eat a piece of pork and it's just too much going on. Think about your components that you have, right? The broth, the potatoes. I'm probably not gonna season potatoes either, but we're gonna ensure that that broth has all the flavor that it could possibly have, all right? So just keep on cooking that pork. Probably take a little bit. I'm gonna use my spider here and just move those potatoes around. You don't want them sticking to each other. The potatoes should take, you know, you got some color going on over there already. These should be about 5 minutes as well, more or less. We're gonna let those fry for a second. We're gonna keep turning this pork tenderloin, and then we're gonna check back in once these muscles open up. All right, let's check out our clams. It looks like they have all opened. That is beautiful. Rolling, steaming boil there. And then our pork is almost done as well. So let's transfer over to plating this up. All right, so our clams have opened up. We have our pork tenderloin right here, which is beautifully caramelized all the way around. We let that rest for a second. And we have our potatoes right here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to cut this pork tenderloin up. We're probably going to put that towards the center of this bowl with the clams around, right? But I want to do some potatoes and stuff as well. So let me start here with my pork tenderloin. So I have a very sharp knife, and I'm going to start by kind of just trimming our edges. Trimming our edges off. I want some like nice chunks that I could move. There you go. All right, so we have some beautiful color on this pork tenderloin. I'm just gonna trim this out because we want some nice pieces that will stand up. Again, shareable, right? You can do this for as many or as little people as you would like, but that's what I like to see on pork is just, you know, don't overdo it. You know, I think a lot of people freak out about pork, and pork is a lot cleaner just in general than it used to be. There's a lot of old school thoughts about, hey, you can never have pork medium. you know, cook it to a medium and let it carry over cooking. There's gonna be about 5 degrees difference in what you see in the final product versus when you temp it coming out of however you're cooking it. So what I also wanna do now that I have these cut is this clam juice, right? Once these clams opened up, they release their juices, and that's pretty briny. And it kind of increased the salt content. So I'm gonna cut that with a little bit of fresh cream that I've warmed slightly, and I'm adding a little bit of parsley to that as well. So I just wanna drizzle a little bit of cream over this. I'm not trying to make a cream sauce, but what I am trying to do is add some richness to the dish and kind of cut that salt a little bit. What I'm also going to add is some chopped parsley, okay? Give you a nice fresh cue that will mix with that juice in the bottom, and you will see that speckled throughout the dish, okay? All that parsley can go in, right? And then I'm just working that parsley and cream into the sauce as such, right? Just kind of work it back and forth. You see the color lighten up. I want to make sure that each mussel has a little bit in it, right? Kind of wet them back up. It's looking incredible already. Beautiful. So clams are ready, pork is ready, potatoes are ready. Potatoes don't need to be seasoned. We just talked about this beautiful broth, right? So you don't need to add a whole lot of stuff to the potatoes. What I'm trying to do with the potatoes is get a nice little platform that we will put our pork on top of. Because at the end of the day, what's gonna happen is that broth is just gonna go all over everything. We're gonna fill this bowl with some broth. And for this portion, you want a fair amount of potatoes to go over that as well. So we're gonna take our pork tenderloin and just attractively line that out right towards the center, all right? And guess what's gonna happen with the clams? Those are gonna go all the way around everything else. So if it falls down a little bit, that's cool. It'll just, you know, all the components will come together in the final dish and you'll have everything deliciously put together. All right, so let's plate our clams all the way around. There's some big clams, they're meaty clams. You know, one of the things that you wanna always think about when cooking clams or mussels is the overcook. These things can turn into little rubber bands if they are overcooked, and you don't want that, right? So what I'm gonna do once I have the clams out is that juice is gonna get poured over everything. That cut side of that pork, the bowl, the potatoes, because this broth is what really makes the Portuguese style pork and clams what it is. We have all those beautiful components in there. All right, so look at that. Beautiful broth in there, golden color, a little bit of parsley. You got that residual onion in there from the marinade itself. So I'm just gonna pour that over the pork first and foremost, a little bit over the clams, make sure they get touched once again. And then literally broth over everything. You want those potatoes to really soak that up. It's all about the broth right here. Right, the aroma that's coming off of this is amazing. You know, you'll taste this just like I did and go, what's that flavor? It's that freaking cinnamon. And nobody ever, every time I serve this up, people always ask me, I just kind of sit back and laugh. It's the cinnamon, man. People think of cinnamon as something that only goes with sweets, but cinnamon is incredible in savory applications when it is used properly and not overly used. So this is my play on a Portuguese style pork and clams. I hope yours look as good as mine. All right, so we're on to our seared scallops with bulgogi. I have my hot pans on, one for the bulgogi, one for the scallops. We're gonna add our oil to both pans. Expedite this a little bit. As you can see, I'm always multitasking on the stove, right? Make sure that's nice and hot. And then my scallops were on paper to dry them out, and I have seasoned them with sea salt. So we're going down, sea salt side down. We're not using all these. I'm kind of cherry picking the nicer looking ones. Right, some of them are broken up. Some of them are a little smaller than the others, but we're fine, we're good. Let's do 8. We'll do 8 of these scallops. Get those nice and seared, right? Once I have those in, I'm just gonna up my flame just a little bit and make sure I get a nice golden brown caramelization. Scallops are very sweet, so you get a beautiful caramelization on them. All right, my bulgogi has been marinated, right? shaved steak. I have a little bit of residual juice in there. And I also have some juice to the side that we're gonna utilize to like make a glaze. So I'm gonna pop that up high, and this all goes in, just like that. As you said, the ribeye is shaved down, so this will cook fairly quickly. Use my tongs to just break it up. I still remember the first time I had bulgogi. It was years ago. I think I was in like 4th grade. We had a culture fair, and everybody brought kind of like a dish from their own culture. And one of my Japanese friends at the time, he was making bulgogi. I didn't know at the time. He gave me a little piece on a toothpick, and I remember that till this day. One of my favorite dishes. I guarantee you, you will love this as well. So we're cooking that. We're caramelizing. I'm gonna let that rock for a second. Let's check our scallops. Almost there. Almost there. You want that beautiful caramelization on there, okay? All right, so our scallops are beautifully seared, as you can see. Nice golden brown on the top. I'm actually gonna take the heat down on those. And on the bulgogi side, we've got caramelized, and we are starting to get to a glaze kind of effect in that pan. We are now ready to plate. All right, so now we are ready to plate. You can have your, fun with what kind of veggie you pair this with. I just did a little bit of sauteed wilted spinach on the bottom of this dish. With bulgogi, one of the things that you almost always have to have, or like the best accompaniment to bulgogi, will be just some freshly steamed white rice. And I have that here. We're gonna go down the middle of this plate with those. And what you're gonna see is we are going to put the scallops right on top, and then follow up with that bulgogi right over the scallops. So again, these are differentiated types of surf and turf plays that you can do. There's a lot of different things that you can do with surf and turf, besides just a lobster and steak or shrimp and X, Y, and Z, right? So put that to the side. My scallops have browned beautifully. We're just gonna plate those right over the top. If you're a scallop fan, I guarantee you that this will be a showstopper for you. We'll stop there. That looks nice, just like that. And then we are going with our bulgogi. All right, so we have that. It's almost glazed. We put a little bit more of that sauce on there. So just going over each scallop. You definitely want it to kind of crust each scallop, right? Don't just kind of throw it on top. Make sure that each one has a little bit on top, because this is a surf and turf, right? You want the full experience of a surf and turf type of play. So not only is it differentiated, it's easy to eat, right? You have these little scallops, a little bulgogi beef on top of that. A little bit of sauce, right? That sauce is very powerful. Like we talked about that on a different episode about how when things concentrate, all those flavors kind of intensify, and that's what we have going on here, right? So we're just gonna simply garnish this with a little bit of sesame seed. You already have the sesame oil in there where you get your flavor. This will add a little bit of texture and just kind of like authenticity, you know what I mean? A little bit of sesame seed on top of that bulgogi beef, and there you have it. This is your bulgogi topped seared scallops. Smells amazing. Wow. All right, so when I mentioned surf and turf, I guarantee you that these type of dishes did not come to your brain, right? And that's exactly why I did them, so you could have a different perspective on how you can approach a surf and turf. I mean, look at these plates. You have the bulgogi along with the scallop, right? A differentiated play. Although this is traditional Portuguese style pork and clams, in a sense, this is just something that you don't see every day. And I'm a firm believer that Portuguese cuisine should be highlighted a lot more, right? So as you guys always know, right? Keep on cooking, keep on doing your thing, right? Use these tips, get your notepad out, right? Take some notes. We'll be having some further stuff coming on down the line, but always remember to never stop cooking, all right? Catch me at jfieldstv@gmail.com, on Instagram and on Facebook, and I will catch you next time. J Fields, and I'm out.